So a month or so back, I got my Nintendo Switch subscription, and you'd think, having bought this, what with this being a channel largely focused on Zelda right now, I'd go play the centerpiece of the Zelda franchise, Ocarina of Time. But if you look closely at the video thumbnail, you already know that, no, I decided to go play A Link to the Past. Why? Well, I legitimately couldn't tell you. I've never played most of the older Zelda games, so I don't have any nostalgia for them, so this video has the potential to be the most cynical take on this game made in the last 10 years. But, no, it's actually still pretty decent. Also, I guess I should say, this is less of a review and more just my experience with the game. Now, I have a pretty good foundation on the lore of the Zelda timeline as a whole, but a lot of the individual games I don't know a ton about, and A Link to the Past is no exception, which is odd because it's one of the most important 2D Zelda games. It's not the highest ranked 2D Zelda on most lists, but it lays a lot of the groundwork for the games that are at the top of those lists. So I guess shame on me for knowing almost nothing going into this game. Now, my first thought when I booted up A Link to the Past and started maneuvering around and fighting my first enemies was, this game is aged alright. I grew up with a lot of old games, like the original Mario and Mario Bros. 3 and Gauntlet Legends, but even then I could never really get into the original Legend of Zelda, partially because it didn't age as gracefully as the other games that I was playing at the time. But it seems like by the third Zelda game, Nintendo had more or less mastered this kind of top-down, semi-non-linear game style. The controls feel responsive, and the pixel graphics communicate both clearly and artistically. You can tell this game was made in that sweet spot time frame where games were still very low resolution, but there was a lot more color options than there once was, and artists had gotten really good at making pixel art look fantastic. And I liked the start of the game a lot. There is a much clearer story from the beginning than there ever was with Breath of the Wild or Tears of the Kingdom. There is an immediate sense of urgency, and the environment heightens that feeling as you start on your quest to infiltrate the castle. The story itself is nothing fancy, but the storytelling is surprisingly clear and compelling, and is a lot more interesting than just get the Master Sword and go kill Ganon. I mean, you do get the Master Sword and kill Ganon by the end, but from a story perspective, it's a much more involved process than that, which is more than I can say for some other Zelda titles, including my precious personal favorite, Breath of the Wild. Now, when the game started out and I saw how small the world was compared to what I was used to, and that there was a quest set up to get 3 magic pendants in order to get the Master Sword, I thought the game would be pretty short and straightforward. I thought I'd go beat these 3 dungeons, snag the Master Sword, and then go kill Aghanim. Quick and easy. And now those of you who've been playing Zelda since 1986 all chuckle and laugh, because boy was I ever wrong. I got my Master Sword and went and stormed Hyrule Castle, and it wasn't until after beating Aghanim that I realized, oh, this game is much larger than I initially thought. There's at least 7 more dungeons, we still got a long way to go. Another thing that caught me off guard was just how much equipment you get. There's just a lot of gear and magic items that all do a lot of different things. I always felt like there was plenty of tools at my disposal, and I didn't even come close to finding everything. There's lots of empty spots left on my inventory screen. Sure, some of the items don't do much outside of small sections of the game, but this is a lot more variety in Link's kit than I was expecting, especially considering the size of Link's kit in the last 2 Zelda games. Seriously, between the gear, the amount of content, and the general improvement in quality over Zelda 1, I never expected this old of a game to have this much to it. The music is also really good. I'm not a music expert, so I'm not really qualified to detail what's good about it, but this score was great, and I definitely recognize a lot of these tunes, or at least the underlying ideas behind these tunes, in the newer Zelda games. I wish there were more songs in this game since there's only 1 dungeon song, but apart from that, it's pretty good stuff. I like the idea behind the Dark World too. I don't necessarily like how hard it is to find the different ways into the Dark World because it basically halts your progress whenever you can't find a way to warp in the area where the next dungeon is, but the concept is really cool. The Dark World is very different from the overworld while still matching its general structure. Its difficulty is also higher, which is a nice way of still having a sense of difficulty progression in this kind of semi-non-linear game. It wasn't all sunshine and roses playing this though. I personally didn't like dungeons in Zelda 1, and I don't like dungeons in A Link to the Past much either. And I don't know if it's just a matter of those dungeons haven't aged as well as the rest of the game, or if my brain just isn't quite wired for that kind of puzzle solving, but I got stumped a lot. I'm not the kind of person who plays a game with a guide pulled up on their phone, but if I get genuinely stuck at some point in the game, I'll look up how to continue. For most games, I end up having to look something up somewhere between 2 and 10 times. But thanks to these dungeons, I ended up having to look up guides dozens of times. It wasn't constant, but it was common enough to be annoying. And more often than not, the solution to whatever puzzle or maze I was stuck on was something that I probably wouldn't have ever thought of, or at least wouldn't have thought of within any reasonable amount of time. And dungeons are the main part of the game, so I had a lot of frustrations playing A Link to the Past. I don't hate everything about these dungeons. I enjoyed how much variety there was between them, and got a lot of satisfaction out of figuring out some of the trickier puzzles. And oddly enough, I got a fair amount of enjoyment out of some of the boss fights. But overall, I wish I didn't have to spend so much of my time in the game in dungeons. There's 13 of these things, and while I appreciate that none of these dungeons overstay their welcome, none of them are crazy long, I just wish that there was a little bit more of the game that was stuff other than dungeons. I actually had to take quite a lengthy break while playing, just because I was getting really sick of the dungeons. Overall though, A Link to the Past was a lot of fun to play around with. If you haven't played it, I would recommend at least trying it out. All things considered, it's aged pretty well, so if you like playing older games, go give it a shot. Anyway, that's all for the day. Bye.